Okay, so a little bit late today. Welcome, very warm welcome to everybody to episode 138 of Level Up. 60 minutes, of course, of live Q&A where your questions really do drive the show. Adriana and Ella are both over in the chat, so do let them know your name, please, and the city from where you're joining. We do like to say hello and welcome people by name, as you know, during the event. They're also going to post a link into the chat for you to be able to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course for you to add your own. If your question is selected, then your name's going to appear in the credits at the end of the show. So do get yours in early and stay with us to see all of that happening. Today, we're going to be talking and asking questions around whether or not we're measuring the right things in our organizations, whether you're in the public or the private sector. We're all given objectives, or we're asked to come up with objectives, and we work towards those and deliver a plan around delivering them and so on, and achieving them, and sometimes even overachieving them. But in this era where it seems that you can measure pretty much everything and there's an endless supply of data, how do we keep on track and surface the key information that can provide truly meaningful insight without those unintended consequences? So helping us make sense of all of this is a cross-functional expert panel. So let's jump in and meet them all. First up is Laurie Bowman. He's responsible for the project portfolio planning and control over at Synchrony projects in Australia. His background in engineering on complex construction projects has really provided a real-world insight into what actually matters when it comes to key performance and so on. And welcome back to the panel, Laurie. Lovely to see you. Sorry, Laurie, we can't hear you. So you may be muted just now. We tried that again. All right. Okay. So we've got a bit of a sound issue with Laurie just now. So let's move on. We'll come back to Laurie's introduction in a few moments. Luca Gambetti is the founder of Equality Italia, who focus on ensuring a positive impact for their clients through leadership development. Luca enjoys coaching, of course, and is building a formidable reputation, not just in Italy, but across the world with his global clientele. Welcome back to Level Up. Luca, lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Nick, for hosting me here today. I think that this is a wonderful team. I think that measurement helped me a lot in managing my own company. It was so important for me.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We're going to dip into that personal experience as well as your client-facing experience very shortly. Falko Werner is up next. He's co-founder, of course, an Agile coach and an accomplished author. He does a lot of different things. Working over at Vempio, Falko helps organizations embed leading practice across their organization, really joining the organization's value chain together and making sure that there aren't any gaps. He pulls through, of course, his experience through his professional career and also coaching skills to be able to really help elevate performance in organizations. And I believe he achieved a first in his engineering IT masters and seeks to achieve excellence, I would say, in pretty much every situation he's involved with. So welcome back to Level Up, Falko. Really good to see you, my friend.
Hello, thanks for inviting me again. I'm happy to be here. I think also on the next episode, so looking forward to Monday as well. Measuring is quite a nice topic. It's also important in IT, in topics where teams try to improve. I like the saying, if you don't measure, or what isn't measured can't be improved. And continuous improvement is there in most of the frameworks. So it's an important thing to do. Let's see how to do it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Mart Rovers is next. President, of course, over at INTERPROM and a regular contributor here on Level Up. He leads teams both in Europe and across the pond in the USA. His work principally focuses on C-suite, on leadership coaching and so on. But it's built on that lifetime contribution of helping everybody, regardless of their position in an organization to really grow and develop. So welcome back to Level Up, Mart. Lovely to see you today.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, APMG, for having me. It's great to be back on. Great panelists, and I saw some fantastic questions that have come in already. So I'm eager to get going with maybe one little mind teaser here, where quality takes the lead. Oh, I said that wrong. Where quantity takes the lead, quality fails.
There you go. You see, there you go. There you go. It's always worth considering. Where quantity takes the lead, quality will fail. And that's very interesting. And I'm sure that we're going to come back to that, because we're often asked to do more, aren't we? Do more of this, do more of that, do more with less is a common call to action, I think. It's fair to say, particularly in a time when a market is changing. You think of all the tech companies and the tech sector, they're going to be asked to do more with less, I'm quite sure, in this next financial year. Laurie, do we have your audio back online now?
Oh, I should be all good now, Nick. There's the mute button problem that some people still haven't overcome. That's me. Welcome. Very good to be here. So thank you. Really good to be back. Really looking forward to this interesting discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, Laurie. And really good to have you back loud and clear with us as well. Now, of course, no Level Up show would be complete without the question master for today. And so joining us from the Thames Valley is Charlotte Miller. So she's over here in the UK. So welcome back to Level Up, Charlotte. Have you had a good week this week?
It's been a cold week. It's been a really cold week with lots of snow here in the UK, and it's freezing today as well.
All right. Okay. So we have Laurie, who's probably sweltering on very late on a Friday night in Australia, and we have colleagues who are just starting their day over in the US, and people who are in the middle of winter in Europe. So wherever you are in the world, we hope that you're seeing us extending a very warm welcome to you. And do jump into the chat on social media and introduce yourselves as we get going. So Charlotte, I can see that the questions are stacking up. Let's go with our first question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from yourself as the first question today. King Wangchuck of Bhutan famously said, gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. Are we counting the right things?
Yeah, now this kind of came up a long time ago it predates my consulting career, this quote, I have to say, by the way, just in case any of you are wondering. It's definitely before my time. But nonetheless, anyway, are we actually counting the right things? Mart, why don't you start us off, and then we'll hear from Laurie.
My thoughts go to, if you have a company, an organization with happy people, team members, that beats anything else. I mean, that feels like, you're part of a family, you're in this together, this team feeling. So I totally agree with the king.
Okay, actually, thank you very much indeed. I'll give you a bit of context on him a wee bit later. Laurie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I agree with the essence of it. Measuring GDP and that sort of thing is probably a little bit above my pay grade, but I do know other countries like New Zealand, for example, have a living standards framework where their intention is to measure the wellness of the community as well as measuring some of the traditional economic measures. So definitely I agree in essence that we need to measure things in a multidisciplined way just to make sure we are looking after our people.
Thank you very much indeed. So Falko, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Luca.
All right. I think depending on what you want to do, you measure things. So if you want to improve on happiness of people in a country or in a region or worldwide, then you should measure it to be able to see the effects of actions that you do. And I think happiness is a good goal to go to. So from that point of view, you want to do that. If you want to improve industry or compare countries based on their productivity in terms of creating valuable things, then you measure that. So there is value in both measurements for different reasons. So please measure everything. I like the approach to gather data, to work on it, and if you have lots of data, you can analyze it. You can derive ideas, experiments, learn from it, and try to see how to best improve both, in best case, happiness and gross domestic product. Gross domestic product.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Falko. And Luca, your thoughts?
I totally agree. I was not able to find the original source, but I read that happiness measurement is regularly done in the United States, and the data shows that this index is declining since 1954 or similar. So it seems that compared to a growth of the gross national product, we seems to measure a decline actually in happiness where this is measured.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? The context for everybody is that this came out of a discussion around sustainable development. So the Kingdom of Bhutan had is quite modest in terms of its gross domestic product, okay? But it has wealth in other ways. It has mineral wealth, and it has wealth in its people, and wealth in its culture and its heritage, and so on. And so it was a question more than anything, for the nation, for the politicians, which was thinking about, can we develop in a sustainable fashion? And what's fascinating about it is that it was in the early 1970s where this challenge was made, where this question was raised, way before we have kind of adopted, if you like, those more sustainable outlooks, if you like, in other countries. So I thought it was very worthwhile, as it was an event where we're looking at, are we measuring the right things, to kind of start off with somebody who was a little bit of a visionary, I think, when it comes to thinking about this, not just about, material wealth, but actually there's value beyond the material. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Thank you, Charlotte, for starting us off with the questions. Let's move on, please, if we can. We'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Meredith. When a business is measuring key performance indicators, how can it reduce the risk of people gaming the numbers?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it, really? Luca, why don't you start us off, and then we'll hear from Falko.
Oh, yes. I can remember working as a consultant in a company where in the board, they discussed how the sales of leisure clothes was going, and every director in the room has a different number. I remember clearly this episode, and I think that every company should have a single version of Truth Office, an office that is deputed to produce the right version of the numbers. Also publishing clear procedures on how data are obtained and calculated and extracted could help.
It's such an important thing, isn't it? So that everybody can have confidence, in whatever that single point of truth is, that single version of the truth is, because without that transparency, there will always be questions in people's mind. What does it include? What does it exclude? When do we have to, how long do we have to wait after the end of the month or the accounting period before we can see the actuals and so on? Really good points. Thank you so much indeed. So let's go next, please, to Falko, and then we'll hear from Mart.
All right, gaming the numbers. I think there are two aspects. One thing we already touched, I think it's transparency and access to the numbers so that everyone has the same basis for decision making. For understanding the flow, the dependencies, and things like that. The other part of the questions that I see is gaming the numbers. So whenever you have someone who has an incentive based on changing things to make a number grow or decline, then they'll do that. So if you want to have objective numbers, don't make people want to change them in a direction and maybe get a benefit or something if a number is changing. Just make them find, for example, not extrinsic but intrinsic motivators that help create a good general understanding and development of the company, not extrinsic ones based on numbers that come out of a regulation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when you think about it as well, time is a really good factor here to consider, because you can sometimes gamify, if you like, or kind of spin. This might be another phrase to use. Performance over a relatively short period of time. It's rather like the coach of the soccer team who arrives and suddenly, the results are really good. Well, I would suggest measure it over a longer period and kind of see what happens next, almost, because time is a very, very important factor. Thank you so much, Falko. Mart, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Laurie.
Yeah, this reminds me of something I experienced as a consultant, where a company was dealing with call wait times were too long. So the decision was made to limit on the call duration. In other words, after 5 minutes or so, as in, it's as in we're done, as in I need to go on to the next call. So this new KPI was driving behavior. So after 5 minutes, whether the call was done or not, or whether there's a solution or not, hey, it's time to move on to the next call. In other words, and that's when it says you're gaming the numbers, it's as in, well, maybe it's not gaming. You're asking for this because these numbers, they drive behavior. So if you come up with KPIs, what's the behavior that I'm going after or for? So obviously, when people are being told after 5 minutes, you hang up, as in, that's not gaming the numbers, right? That's as in, you asked for this. So, in other words, the goal should be bigger. I mean, the message should be as in, what's the goal we're trying to accomplish here? And if you pick the wrong KPIs, yeah, you can call it gaming, but you ask for it in essence.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Those unintended consequences of making a change drive the very behavior that you were looking for, but then it has a hidden problem, kind of lurking behind it. Laurie, your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I agree with both of the previous comments. I think normally we're really, the goal is to get the desired behavior. So if the desired behavior isn't happening, it means we don't just need to measure those outcomes, we also need to measure the behavior itself. So a classic where you get gaming of the system is things like business cases for projects, where departments will get rewarded by receiving funding for making something look good on paper, but by doing things like benchmarking, statistical analysis, even AI in the not too distant future, we'll be able to encourage the right behaviours to have people putting in ethical cases, for example. Another one, it's very similar in the safety industry as well, where things like measuring incidents might, for a low maturity company, it might be frowned upon if there's a lot of incidents being reported. So they'll, teams might try to underreport or something like that. But if you can reward teams for reporting incidences and somehow fine-tune the ones so that there's very objective criteria for measuring things to reduce that gaming that can happen, that's about all you can do.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much indeed for that. There are these hidden unintended consequences, aren't there, of making, changes to the way in which an organisation is measured, and they're often linked as well to rewards. And as soon as you get that kind of happening, and you're skewing the behavioural trait by rewarding certain behaviours in cash terms or otherwise, then that can make a massive difference. So yes, absolutely right. What's fascinating questions to kind of start us off now then. I can see quite a lot of people on social media today, so thank you for joining. Can't see everybody though, and it would be really good for you to introduce yourselves. Just please let us know your name and the city from where you're joining, and then we can bring you into the show. And also don't forget that you can just type your question directly into the social chat, and one of the team will pick it up from there and bring it into the event. Okay, so excellent. Charlotte, I think we should move on. Let's take our next question for the panel, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Theo. It takes time to measure everything. How can we make quick, agile decisions to grow our business?
Falko, start us off, please, on this.
Well, it takes time to measure things if you do it manually. So the first action I would try to implement is to gather data as much as possible in an automated way. So evaluating things that are there in IT systems and only build upon this. And then it's easier to not have to invest that much time in gathering information. And also the evaluation of content of data is easier in such a format where you get into maybe even machine learning or other techniques that can help for decision making. Expert systems are there quite a few decades already building on those. And next to that, have a direct connection to feedback providers so that you don't have to necessarily manually contact them. But if you have like a development team for a product, and so try to get the connection get in touch directly without too many people in between. So invite someone to a product demonstration or a sprint review, get direct feedback to reduce the time it takes to communicate such feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Falko. I think there's a lot of aids now that we can use to try and do some of that number crunching for us. Laurie, your thoughts? Then we'll hear from Luca.
I think it's really important to prioritize what we measure or what we really want to monitor closely. So measure what matters is the sort of phrase that I like to use. But by taking a risk-based approach, so most organizations, particularly projects, usually have some form of risk framework, and it's usually the risk register and the risk framework that gives you indications of what really matters. So what can either give us opportunities for growth, or what are the risks that we need to watch that could harm us. So I think linking what you're measuring with your key risks is definitely a good starting point, because measuring everything can be a little bit overwhelming.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with that. Measuring everything can be absolutely overwhelming. Sometimes can paralyze you, can't it, with too much information to be able to make a clear decision. Luca, your thoughts?
Yes, I would suggest to simply to measure less. Cognitive studies show that we are able to focus on 4 to 7 events maximum. I will suggest 3. So for my people, I selected 3 numbers, 3 metrics to look on and focus on this. We use metrics to change behaviors. We say it is impossible to change behaviors if we show a lot of data. People will not understand anything and will not react.
I think that's a really good idea, to simplify it, just to focus on certain things at a certain time. And I'm imagining that over time, those 3 things may evolve, and you may leave one of those things behind you and adopt another one, so that the business kind of moves forward in that sense. So very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Mart, final thoughts?
Just quickly, that I want to insert the word value in this conversation. First off, you don't measure everything. Second, measure what's of value to you, to your customers, Is it customer retention? Is it customer satisfaction? Is it customer, you have your loyalties as far as loyal customers. So what's of value to you? Have a conversation about that, and then focus on that and narrow it down. Like Luca said, I totally agree. So yeah, stay focused after that, but go for the value.
I certainly think that that's true. Now, one observation that I have is that generally in my country, we have fairly low levels, or we used to have fairly low levels of achievement in the STEM subjects, okay? And so people who are late career generally don't necessarily have a great foundation. Some do, but many don't. And so people struggle with the can we go back to the panel view, please, TD? Thanks. Yeah. So people struggle with being able to interpret complex sets of data quickly. And there's some really excellent visualization tools now that are available to people so that you can produce trends and extrapolations of data to be able to highlight what's important rather than just presenting the raw data as is and expecting others, to be able to interpret it. And it's often a hidden thing. People who are mid to late career are less likely to kind of say that they don't really get the data, if that makes sense. So it's a good idea, I think, to invest some time in trying to tell a story with the data, rather than actually just presenting it in its raw format. And then you can transform those numbers, if you like, into something much more engaging, much more meaningful, perhaps for your colleagues. Excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Charlotte, let's move on, please. We'll take our next question.
Thanks, Nick. We've got another question from Meredith. Meredith asks, when a business has a sea of data, how can a business know what are the right things to measure?
Okay, well, this kind of links in directly, doesn't it, to the question that we just had. Laurie, start us off, and then we'll hear from Luca.
Yes, so it's very much related to the last question, and I agree with what Mart said about value. And risk is closely linked to value because the purpose of risk management is to create or protect value. So whatever your organisation is, and typically organisations will have a different amount of weighting that they put on economic value, social value, environmental value, making sure that you've got some sort of a rating system for prioritising and then really measuring those things that are of greatest value. So typically that'll be economic, social and environmental in some manner for most companies.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Luca, next please, and then Falko.
Yes, it is linked to what we said before. First of all, there should be a clear objective. Without a clear objective, you cannot measure anything. When you have a clear objective, you will select the 2-3 metrics that can best help you to predict if you are reaching your objective or not. So your objective, let's call value, but in more general terms, it's something you are trying to change in your organization. Your objective first, the metrics, the measurements second.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Falko?
Yeah, from a methodology point of view, if you have kind of everything measured, like the sea of data that you mentioned in the question, you can try to derive dependencies of variables that build upon each other. You can build a network of data points that belong to each other and see which things raise. If you lower or raise one of the parameters, from that you can build like an overview and understanding of the system on a data point of view and see which are the leading indicators and which are like performance indicators, lagging indicators following later. Like also what Nick, what you said in the beginning, that there is time restraint time relationship to all those, most of those measurements and variables. And sensitivity analysis is your friend in that respect, and also probably machine learning or other technologies. But still, if you don't know where you want to go, doesn't help you to have a big map, and that's why value is key. And there are different types of value to think about: customer value, organizational value, economical value in general, stakeholders. So pick your focus point, pick your priorities, and then go from there.
Thank you very much indeed. And you mentioned stakeholders, and it's such a key community of people, because often, it's the stakeholders who are the influencers. To be able to kind of say this is the sort of direction of travel, that they would like to see your organisation going in. And of course, the ultimate stakeholders, if you're working in the public sector, may well be the electorate. Between them and you and your role in whatever service you are delivering are a whole host of folks who are looking to, ensure that the organisation delivers value in the terms that the stakeholders would wish for. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. So Charlotte, I can see the questions are beginning to stack up now, which is really great. So let's take our next question if we can.
You can, Nick. We've got a question from Stephen. Stephen asked, do you have any experience about using OKRs, objective key results?
All right. Okay. So this is a different perspective on looking at how you go about setting goals and these kinds of things. Luca, why don't you start us off on this, and then we'll hear from Laurie.
Yes, we have experience. We actually use OKR in our company. I think it's nothing new, I have to say, because if you browse the internet, you will find a YouTube video called What is an OKR by Andy Grove. It's a video coming from the 70s in which Andy Grove talks about the management by objectives and uses the term OKR. So nothing new, but this means that you define an objective, and your people, the people working with you, try to find ways to catch this objective. These are the key results. So it's really a means to cascade your objectives through the organizational structure, involving your people in finding solution and being creative on how that we can possibly reach our objectives.
Yeah, thank you, because that sense of ownership and cascading ownership is often lacking, isn't it? People look at the objective and they can't see themselves as part of the answer often. It's kind of almost at arm's length from their day-to-day experience. Laurie, your thoughts, please, and then Falko.
So I guess the first answer is I don't have experience in this area. But the one comment I would make is that with any performance system, if you're just measuring the outcomes or the objectives, you always run that risk that someone's going to be rewarded for looking good or gaming the system. So I always think it's good to complement these types of measurement systems with something that's measuring behaviour to ensure that you're getting the right behaviour. So a good example is with a lot of the new reporting requirements that are coming in for emissions and environmental concerns, that there's a lot of what they call greenwashing going on, and fairly soon companies are going to be getting fairly heavily punished by regulators and so forth if that behaviour is going on. So I think it's very useful for companies, if they want to be successful, to have measures in place that are checking, using data, doing something to help qualify and ensure the quality of the measures that are being done when they're outcome-based, just so we don't have these humans getting in the way, sort of gaming the system and trying to make things look good on paper.
Yeah, you're certainly really valid point there, Laurie, to kind of make, because obviously with APMG as well being an exam institute, it's very easy, for people to be tempted to teach to a test, from time to time, and it really doesn't help anybody. So it's about making sure that folks are delivering the full experience, and there's transparency around then that testing and checking and examinations and so on is actually able to quantify somebody's knowledge and quantify somebody's application of that understanding in real world scenarios. So thank you very much. Very important part of all of this. Falko, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Mart.
Mostly from John Durr's book from 1999, Measure What Matters. And quite a few interesting examples with organizations like Google or the Gates Foundation, even Bono as a singer, to get things moving in their goals. And the nice thing about OKRs is that you have a process coming with it, checking regularly the results that are defined, and if they really lead to the objectives being achieved in a way that every quarter or so you update the key results, and then kind of have measurement and motivation to change things in the way you're doing. Like if you kind of set a very important or interesting or very high goal, then you have to change lots of behavior in yourself, in the team and other parts of the organization to achieve this. For example, when Google set up their Chrome browser, in the first year, they had a goal to achieve 1 million users. And the year after, they want to 10 times this result, so 10 million. So you have to do things differently, like advertising, go to conferences, market it, and you can't do that from your standard way of working. And that's why I like it, because you always set new goals, new measures for achieving those goals, and that's a very important thing to do if you measure some things. And yeah, that's my part.
And I think that's where I agree, Falko. I think that's where having this sense of joint ownership, joint endeavor becomes super important, because if people feel that something is simply being imposed on them, then they're less likely to buy into that and think of those creative solutions and be willing to try things out in order to be able to achieve that moonshot type kind of goal that it's hard to imagine until you get into it, how you're going to do it. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Final thoughts on this one, Mart?
Yes. So I'd like to throw in the word motivation in this whole conversation, because that's what OKRs can result into, as in, if you as an employee or a stakeholder know what your personal objectives are and then we communicate it to you, there's no way you can relate your personal objectives to the organization's objectives. You may wonder, why am I doing this? Why is this so important? But when there's a straight connection, and that's the whole concept behind the OKRs, you set the objectives, and then it trickles down to leadership, to management, and so on. And then each supports each other. That whole cascading concept. Then your purpose, your reason that you're there, your reason for what, why I'm emphasizing or focusing on this so much. This is a priority. It's so motivational in essence because of this OKR concept. I can highly recommend using it. I've seen it in organizations doing tremendous work. Even ISO standards ask for that. As in, what is your contribution to the objectives that you've set? So it's not foreign in essence if you think about it. But unfortunately, for some organizations, it still is.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's an evolution, I think, for all of us, in our organizations, to be able to move from, perhaps a model which has served an organization very well historically, people have sort of got used to. Even things like, there's a certain cadence. There's a monthly meeting on this and a quarterly one that looks at those things. And, every 6 months there's a review and, these kinds of things. And even cadence forms habits. Do you remember that famous visualization of the quality audit where it's an unpaved road and then the audit begins with a little sign at the side of the road and there's beautiful tarmac for the next 100 meters? As an organization scrambles to kind of, we've updated everything, just before the auditor arrived, the quality auditor at any rate, and so it all looks pretty good from here on in. So even frequency and cadence and so on can actually form patterns which have unintended consequences sometimes as well. Very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. I'm kind of feeling energized actually today about thinking differently about how we go about thinking about objectives and linking them in with our daily work and so on. If you're watching online and this is your experience as well, if you're heading towards April, it's often the beginning of a new financial period for many people around the world who follow the UK tradition of April being the beginning of a new financial period. Then please get in touch. Tell us what your thoughts are so far. Are you looking at another year of similar kinds of objectives, or are you starting to mix it up a little bit and look for different ways of achieving different goals and different ends? Charlotte, let's take our next question, if we may.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Patricia. Some things can't be measured, social value, well-being, etc. How do you accommodate for the unmeasurable in data-driven decision-making processes?
Okay, Laurie, start us off, please, and then we'll hear from Falko.
Okay, so this is a really good question, and it's so thank you for the question, Patricia. It's a good one. Some things can't be measured in an objective way, but there's certainly a level of subjective measurement or qualitative type measurement that can be assigned to social value in particular. So we can look at things like safety. There's a number of different aspects that we can measure. We can measure relationships with supply chain. We can do team climate surveys to measure the feeling of the project team and things like that. So though they may not be as easy to measure quantitatively as things like dollars and cents, for example, we can actually measure them and we can rate them and use those ratings to drive decision making. And so once again, I fall back to things like a risk management framework. So if you've got a process that looks at the different value that your company places on things like social value, well-being, financial, environmental, all of those sorts of things, you can use something like a risk framework just to help guide decisions. It will never be 100% accurate or anything like that. It will never be as easy as measuring profit and loss, for example, but certainly there are processes and qualitative processes that we can still use to measure and produce dashboards and to monitor.
I think you're right. And maturity is a key word here in considering measurement, because some of the things that we take for granted today and we say, oh, that's easy to measure, that's because there are generally accepted accounting principles, and there is a chartered accounting profession which is standardized throughout the world, and there are laws and there's governance which is embedded, and it goes all the way back probably to the time when somebody was trying to estimate how long and how much effort was it going to take to build a pyramid. So there's a huge amount of human history in accounting for effort, time, money, those sorts of things, and a little less perhaps in figuring out sustainable ways in which you can measure sentiment and you can measure feelings and you can measure some of those more qualitative type things that, as you were describing, Laurie, I think you're absolutely right there. Very good. Thank you. Falko, and then we'll hear from Mart.
Yeah, when I heard Laurie, I was agreeing, same with what you just said, Nick. I was also thinking about the social sciences. They do actually exactly that. Psychology, other parts there as well. They build upon the numbers they get from surveys, from answers from individuals. So they probably also go statistical means and bring those together, building on not maybe just one or two people, but 100 or thousands of people. And then you have a statistically relevant result you can build decisions upon. That's what the question that we had in the beginning was, what do you measure? Gross domestic product or happiness? Happiness is such a measure that you see that's probably not being calculated in dollars, cents, or euros, or whatever. So that's like something else, and you can, but you have to do it a different way than accounting and revenue and so on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This week we've had a fantastic celebration of International Women's Day earlier on in the week, and we had lots of different posts about, of course, business, and LinkedIn is pretty much full of celebrating, quite rightly celebrating the achievements of women all over the world in different sets of circumstances. One of the subjective measures of freedom is how you feel. How do you feel being able to go about your daily business in a dignified way, without harassment, without challenge, without all of this sense of it's late at night, can I be walking home on my own? So one of the qualitative measures of policing locally is safe neighborhoods. How do people feel in their neighborhood? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? And that's very much based on those sorts of social sciences to really understand what the voice of local residents is and translate that into meaningful measures and meaningful trends for organizations that want to deliver safety to local citizens. Thank you very much indeed, Falko. Very insightful answer to this one. Mart, final thoughts on this, please.
Well, Patricia, I hate to say it, the word "can" doesn't really resonate. And I'm an American, and we can do this, so we can measure this. In other words, I like to throw in the whole idea around relationships, as in, if you have wonderful relationships in the team that you work, the project team, the department, the business unit that you work, and the Business Relation Management Institute has put together this maturity framework to measure the maturity of a relationship. I mean, teams that are well-oiled and well-organized and where there's a lot of trust going on, that definitely has an impact on the well-being of these team members, for example. In other words, it can be measured. It's just a matter of looking for, what is them going to measure, finding the right metric. So I guess this the coaching in me, as in, I'd love to help you, Patricia, because it can be done.
Absolutely. It absolutely can be done. And on that note, I would suggest, if you're watching, do reach out to the panel, please, and connect with them on LinkedIn, because we always welcome, connections and building our networks, and for you to build yours and extend yours into our spheres as well. So please do that. Just look us up on apmginternational.com on the events page for today's episode. You'll find a little link through to everybody's LinkedIn profile, make it easy for you to go and find us all in one place. Very good. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I think we've just about got time to fit in one more question.
Thanks, Nick. And it's a question from one of our panelists, Falko. Falko asks, what are the best leading indicators for business growth?
All right. Now, this is a question that none of these consultants have ever been asked before at all. Okay, so I'm just going to give them a moment just to kind of think about it for a moment. But it is those kinds of green shoots of growth, green shoots of recovery. What are the leading indicators? Why don't you start us off, Mart?
Just to mention a few, I want to leave some for the rest of the panel, but when your inventory is running out, or when profit or revenues are increasing, or when you hire more new employees, those are all indicators, as in, hey, I'm on the right track. And there's a whole bunch more, but I want to give the other panelists also an opportunity to chime in.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. Laurie, your thoughts, leading indicators?
Yeah, once again, it depends, but depending on what you're in the business of, so there can be all sorts of external economics, so the things that are happening in the external environment that can often give you a leading indicator as to what direction or what new products you want to go in. In terms of more internal or more probably less leading indicators, I'd agree with Mart, looking at things like increasing profit, increasing revenue, increasing headcount of your staff, those sorts of things.
Thank you so much. Very important and understandable as well. So thank you for that, Laurie. Luca, let's hear from you, and then we'll go back to Falko.
Yes, in order to identify your leading indicators, you should understand, you should ask yourself, what are the practices that will bring you to, that will enable you to reach your goals. So the leading indicators should measure if you have a practice, if the practice is applied, if the practice is working. So there is no general answer. You should have definitely some practices to reach your goal, and you should measure these practices.
Thank you so much. Falko, you asked the question. What are your thoughts on the leading indicators?
Yeah, I think are good ideas, and thank you for your insights. I really like that. I was myself thinking about things like visibility being talked about, hearing the product name, company name, not only in paid advertisements, but maybe in social media, all those ideas around communication and visibility. But thanks for all your thoughts and ideas as well.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I think my view on it would be along those lines as well. Often, people look to sales as a good indicator, but that can happen some way down the line. So from a marketing perspective, as Falko was saying, some of the early indicators may well not be in material sales, but actually in market response and engagement and the way in which people are starting to pick up on your ideas. I remember some years ago, there was a group at a university who were looking at working on the storage of electricity using sodium ions based on seawater rather than lithium ions technology, which is in commonly used today. Now, it was a research group, so they were 10, 15, 20 years away from having a product. Just this year, I saw that they've spun up a commercial organization, and they're actually starting to produce their first sodium ion storage devices. So that's wonderful. But 10, 15 years ago, it was much more of a vision. You'd have to wait a long time for a sale. So there you go. Leading indicators. Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed, Falko. So I hope we've been able to give everybody online a bit of inspiration for your thinking as you go into a new financial year this year as to how you might go about, setting up your objectives and linking people's engagement really as part of an organization into delivering them. We have got a fantastic question which is online, and I'm afraid we've just run out of time today to be able to answer it. So I'm so sorry, Elton. We're going to have to come back to your question about how do you keep a business growing but managing your ethical position at the same time. It's a brilliant question. So we're going to make sure, Question Master, if we can, to schedule that one in for another episode in the future. All right, now then. So let's hear from our panel, if we may, your closing remarks for today. So Laurie, let's come to you first.
Great discussion. Thank you very much, fellow panelists. I think the overall message I'd like to leave is just the importance of designing those indicators really well. So at their worst, I've seen KPIs be used horrendously, particularly financial indicators that have caused project teams to suddenly spend money outrageously and all of this sort of thing. Whereas at the other end of the extreme, I've seen KPIs and measures be used really effectively to improve the maturity of project teams and to get better outcomes for companies. So really putting a lot of thought into designing KPIs or OKRs really well so that you get the desired behaviour.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Some good guidance around all of that available as well. Falko, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Mart. I think we may have just lost Falko for a moment with his connection.
Sorry.
There we are. Okay,
so you're back. I just missed that. Sorry.
That's okay, no
problem. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm happy to have joined in. Maybe also be able to join a few of my into the group. Regarding measurement and indicators, I think stay open and be open for changing them over time to adapt to the changes in the environment.
Thank you very much indeed. Martin and Luca.
Thanks again for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great questions. I enjoyed the OKR ones the most. And so I want to finish with a quote from Charles Goodhart, an economist, who once said, "When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure."
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Mart. Luca, final thoughts, then we'll hear from Charlotte.
Great episode. I'm very passionate about measurement, and I think that every team has the right to know their scoreboard. If they must know if they're winning or losing. I would recommend for our first question the book Far-Sighted by Stephen Johnson on how to take decision for the future generations, hundreds of years in the future.
Excellent. So I think that was Far-Sighted by Stephen Johnson.
Far-Sighted, Stephen Johnson.
Okay. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you, Luca. We'll look that up and get that link into the chat for everybody who's watching online. Thank you. Charlotte, final thoughts on today's episode? Sorry, can't hear you, Charlotte.
Big thank you to the viewers and a big thank you to the panelists for today's show. A very insightful episode today. Thank you.
All right, very good. It was very timely as well, actually, as I think we approach the middle of March and we're all getting ready for something new coming around the corner. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel, for your time today. We really do appreciate it. Great job, and great job to everybody who was online as well, joining in with the conversation in the social chat. It's really great to see you all. Over on our website, you can, of course, search for more than 1,500 questions and their answers. They're all curated there for you, very easy for you to access, and it's a brilliant resource to be able to tap into. So don't forget that you can also listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. They're published every week and very easy to subscribe to and then consume those on your commute perhaps or on a daily walk. Please do, though, take a moment, if you can, to be able to like, comment, share and subscribe to the content, particularly on YouTube. It does really help us out and helps other people then discover the value that APMG and the panelists are able to bring to you all. Looking forward now, coming up in the next week, on Monday the 13th, we're looking at how to build better business cases. So often the business case really is the ignition point of getting a new initiative truly launched. And for those of you who are in the Netherlands or who are working overseas and have Dutch as a first or a second language, we've got a local language webinar coming up actually on Tuesday about the Business Information Systems Library, or BISL for short. Friday next week, we explore careers as public-private partnership specialists, and that's at 2 p.m. GMT next Friday, which is, I think, the 17th of March. So very good. Look forward to that. Thanks very much, everybody. Subscribe to the show. We'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much indeed. We'll see you next time.